Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer here at Promethean Action, and I will be your host. Joining us today is the lovely Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. Welcome, ladies. And thank you very much for being here. This is our 6th show. Every week we do these, we get more questions. So I just want to say right off the bat, we got over 80 questions this week from around the world. And we simply just can't answer all 80 of these questions. So we're doing a lot of grouping, and we can't take every question is what I'm saying. So as the stream gets started, please let us know where you're from in the chat. That'd be super awesome. Please like and subscribe to, please like this video if you haven't yet already. Florida, Tampa Bay. Welcome, Ron, your first live performance. We've only been doing, this is only our 6th one, so it hasn't been too many. Greeting from Norway. Thank you, Orvind, for being here. Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Welcome. Thailand, interesting. Another Danish friend. Southwest Florida, Idaho, New York. Awesome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, so how about this? Do something a little bit different. I'm going to take a warm-up question really quick from the chat. So put in your best questions really quick, and we'll take a quick warm-up question before we get to like the list of questions. We have almost 50 questions that we're going to ask today. Let's see what we get. We're getting support from all over the world like we always do. Salida, Colorado. Anyone have any questions in the chat? Okay, we'll see what comes up. We're going to go to our first question here, and then we'll take one as they begin to come in the chat. Okay, so this first question is from Norman. Just recently found out you ladies and agree with your bigger picture of events that are happening globally. The question is simple. Do you truly believe that the Anglo-Dutch Empire can be brought down? After all, they have survived hundreds of years. It appears to me that the dollar is failing and there is nothing we can do to stop it. We are headed into an authoritarian era if we can't stop it. Yeah, I agree with you, Norman, on that last thing. Certainly, if we can't stop this, the world's going to be very authoritarian. So thank you. So, ladies?
You're muted, Barbara.
Sure. If you would have asked me, say, more than 10 years ago, whether this could be brought down readily, I'd say, well, I'm fighting to do that, but I don't know whether that's going to happen in my lifetime. Right now, it's happening in my lifetime with the administration of Donald Trump, who actually in his first term recognized that the big difference in the world was between, as he put it, directly at Davos and other wonderful locations like the United Nations. The division in the world is between patriots and those who are globalists. It's between pessimists and those who are optimists. And those are two big differences in states of minds. Optimists build things. Optimists actually like to think about the future and put both feet in it and create it. Pessimists, on the other hand, think the world is dying, and basically that's what we're left with. That's just fate. So yes, I now believe that it's very possible we can actually dethrone these guys. They're in a total disaster. You speak about the dollar failing. Every single European economy is in depression right now. We're not. And the reason for that is that there's an economic policy which Trump has actually put into existence, which says we're going to be a nation state, we're going to be the hottest country on earth, and we're going to be an example to the rest of the world what happens when you turn everything into a building machine to actually build the future for everybody versus the kind of crazy thing we've had under the Anglo-Dutch Empire, which favors the very few controlling things and treats labor and most people who build things as so many serfs. So An authoritarian era, I don't know. What, you know, if what you're thinking about is what happens in these declining economies in Europe, what do they reach for? Censorship, jailing dissent, fixing elections, all of those things are part of their repertoire. People, however, confuse the word authoritarian a little bit because of the media brainwashing with leadership. And that's why Trump is called an authoritarian, why Putin is called an authoritarian, why Xi Jinping is called an authoritarian. They're actually exerting leadership over nation states, albeit under very different systems. So I think we've got to be careful about the wording there. And I am completely optimistic if we continue fighting that we're going to be able to do this. Look at the miracle of what Trump actually overcame, and we all overcame by fighting through to November. Now we've got the next fight coming, which is the midterms, to actually consolidate this third industrial revolution in the United States. So that's how I'd answer your question, Norman.
Yeah, I just add, think of what Barbara said. You know, put yourself back 10 years ago and ask yourself what you were doing 10 years ago. Were you fighting? Now, I'm sure many of you on this, listening to this broadcast were, but it was very dark days back then. And a lot of people just wanted to throw in the towel. The reason that we are where we are with the possibility of actually finally defeating the Anglo-Dutch Empire is because a relatively small handful of people in this country and in other parts of the world continued to fight even when it looked difficult. So I would just ask everybody to reflect on that question.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. If you're joining us for the first time, you're joining our weekly live question and answer stream. We primarily take questions from our newsletter readers. I send out the link to submit your question numerous times in the week in our newsletter. I'm going to put the link here. First, if you're new here, please like and subscribe this video if you're enjoying it. If you've been subscribed on YouTube for a while, I urge you to get our newsletter. It allows us to have a connection to you that is outside, much harder for Google and YouTube to control. So the link to get our free newsletter is there. Now, I did mention I was going to take a warm-up question here, and one came in and I think is very good because it's becoming quite relevant once again. Mike Behan asks, how to end political judicial activism?
Elect a Congress that actually works with the president. That's the way the Constitution says you do it. And that's what actually has to happen. Those are the big stakes of the midterm. If you don't really have a Senate or a Congress which is voting with the president to circumscribe certain activities, there are bills right now in the Senate basically very clearly delineating what powers the president has and forbidding the judiciary from intruding on those powers as they are doing rampantly throughout the country right now. So we're not going to end it necessarily. I mean, the Supreme Court's going to do some things, but you can't depend on that. What you've got to actually do is look at the fact that you've got an entire generation of kind of, I call them the Jacobins in robes, who are in the court system appointed for life. And the way you actually deal with that is to circumscribe their powers legislatively, and that can only be done by a Congress which has some guts and actually understands the Constitution. So that's where I'd leave that.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to go to our next question is from Ray. And I'll read it here. With the importance of the relationship between the imperialist components of the attack on U.S. sovereignty and free people struggle against such, how do we help educate simple minds that are not politically minded to learn and understand these concepts? We must be able to share this information with people and help them grasp the logic and the reality of the propaganda war against us. Also, we who wish to help them are not well-versed in teaching? Thank you, Ray. Well, thank you, Ray, for this very important question. So I open up the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Yeah, I'll take a first crack at that. I actually want to pull out one thing that Ray said there, and said, how do we help educate simple minds that are not politically minded? Frankly, we probably have more problem with people who don't think they're simple and who think that they're politically minded. But it's the same problem. It's what I referenced a couple of weeks ago when somebody asked about the difference between Plato and Aristotle. Because the question of changing how somebody thinks is not a question of overwhelming them with more facts. Guess what? You've all tried that. We've all tried that. That doesn't change it. That's the Aristotelian approach. The collection and rearrangement of facts is somehow going to lead you to the truth. The approach that Plato took, and this is where I think the question of how do you organize people is so important, is constantly presenting paradoxes to people. You know, you think that, but look at this. You see this, but look at that. Now, I'll give you an example of this, because both Barbara and Adam and I were engaged for decades before Donald Trump came along, trying to educate people that the American system of political economy was not free trade and was not communism. And, you know, if I added up all the hours of my life where I talk to people about this, it's going to add up to a good chunk of my life. And then if you asked me how many people I actually changed by, you know, lecturing them, you know, I probably counted on a couple of hands. Then along came Donald Trump. And Trump, especially now in his second term, where he's in a commanding position, he's got a fair amount of power to move. Obviously, on the tariff question is one of the most fundamental ones, which does relate back to that judicial activism question, which we will have to deal with. But all of a sudden, people who thought that they were for free markets, free trade, you know, all the freedom, free to choose, you know, the whole Milton Friedman, Chicago school, Austrian school world, because it was about freedom and it was against control and so on, are confronted with the fact that Donald Trump has a different approach, that he believes that there are certain values that you have to embed into your economic decisions. It's not just free. So the number of people that I've talked to, is just especially since Trump came in the second time, who are saying to me, oh gosh, I thought I was, you know, Chicago school. I thought I was for unbridled free enterprise and so on. Now I have to rethink that, because that's not what Donald Trump is doing. And, you know, it's because I think it's because we have a tremendous opportunity to educate people today, because you have a figure in a position of power who has survived everything that he threw against him, you know, up to his finally returning to the White House, who is now carrying out a series of policies which are quite different from this simple-minded world of left versus right, or big government versus little government, or capitalism versus communism. And he's throwing something completely new, which is a paradox. And I would just say that is the key to organizing people. Figure out how to get them in their own mind to discover, wait a minute, I thought this, but it doesn't fit. Especially with what Donald Trump is doing. You know, you can also take it on the foreign policy question. China's the enemy, Russia's the enemy, you know, and Trump says it's not true. I'm friends with these leaders. I can talk to them. We have differences, but we're going to work it out. So I think we have a tremendous teaching tool in the person of Donald Trump, who kind of lives in the world of paradox, as far as I'm concerned. And you should key off of that and get people to start to question why they thought what they thought. And then you've got the possibility for actually educating them.
Thank you, Susan. If you're joining us for the first time, my name's Adam Sturman. I'm a producer with Promethean Action. You're watching our live question and answer show, where we take questions primarily from our newsletter subscribers. I've been putting the link down below, but it's also in the description. If you're watching on a mobile phone or a laptop or something like that, you can get our free newsletter in the description. We do this every Thursday, and we thank you for joining. Please like this video and subscribe if you're just tuning into us for the first time. We have 3 political updates we do a week, plus a live question and answer show on this YouTube channel. Okay, we're going to move on to the next set of questions here that we got from our email. So we've grouped these next ones together, are going to be on the question of Israel and Gaza, which so many people just write in about. Okay. Let me just double check here. Yes. Okay. From Amy. I just heard that Tony Blair and Jared Kushner met Trump today at the White House to discuss Gaza. I know Tony Blair has a history, so can you please shed some light on his background and what you think this meeting may all be about? Thank you, Amy. And this next one here from, I think it's Ute something. Sorry, from Denmark. Ute from Denmark. I wonder how Israel can ever be stopped, because I don't think they will stop themselves from using the Samson option. What's your thoughts on that? Thank you very much. This one's from Lloyd. I'm going to condense this down really quickly, but his question's really in the beginning. Thanks for answering my question last time, but although you seem to be very knowledgeable and have high moral values, I think you're being blind to Trump's perhaps main failing, his tolerance of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. You say he's boxed in for now due to Congress, etc., but I don't buy that. If European leaders can condemn Israel's actions, and they're apparently under the control of the globalists, I don't see why Trump can't. And I'll take this last part. He also brings up Kushner and Blair met with Trump on Wednesday. Finally, I've heard that the Chabad plans to orchestrate an Armageddon end time event, and many Christians have been suckered into interpreting the Bible that way, with Israel predicted to defeat Russia and the Arabs. So I can't support Trump under these circumstances. Any comments? Thank you, Lloyd. I have 2 more here on this question. I am wondering how Israel fits in. Whenever I read something that attacks the US or Christian culture, it is almost exclusively written or promoted by Jews. It's like they say every single time. I wonder if Israel is the cabal's toady working to undermine countries for the New World Order. What are your thoughts? Also, you have taught me an amazing amount in very short time. Thank you, Kurt. And the last one in this section here is this one from Richard. Please explain how is Netanyahu part of this Anglo-Dutch alliance? I'm new to your educational program, and I find that it explains a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, and everyone else who just wrote in on this topic.
Okay, I'll take that. Look, first and foremost, you have to understand that this is a war, all right? It is not something that our generation, even the boomers, except for Vietnam, experienced, really. We've experienced a lot since then, obviously, but not directly. People react in a war, as the president keeps saying. They have, everything that they bring to a war is their culture, their history, everything else. Once a religious war, which is what this is, it is a religious war between, essentially a form of radical Islam created by the British to control the Middle East, called the Muslim Brotherhood, which is what Hamas is, versus a form of Messianic Zionism, again, created by the British through Jabotinsky and through a tendency called revisionist Zionism. These 2 sides have hated each other for generations. They fought several wars, which has resulted. Gaza used to be part of Egypt. All right. It is a war created entity. It is not the ancient homeland of whoever here. These are things which were created by treaties which the British used, starting with the Sykes-Picot Treaty, to actually create a permanent war in the Middle East and therefore control oil, which was the primary strategic motivation. along with controlling the trade routes going to India, which was a key part of the empire. We have said often, this cannot be solved between these two warring parties. When the Europeans stand up there and suddenly say, oh, we're the holy ones at this point, we're the guys who are actually saying, recognize a Palestinian state. Well, what is that concretely in the midst of this war? Gaza is completely destroyed. One could argue that it has been destroyed for a very, very long time. The only aura of hope offered anywhere in this were Trump's Abraham Accords, which essentially got a bunch of Arab states together who have enormous wealth, and it's all based on, obviously, the economies of the Middle East. And what they said is, we've had this problem forever. There's a young generation of leaders who want to solve it. We want to solve it through economic development. That's what the Abraham Accords were all about. Hamas did what it did. It was not some liberation battle. It was a terrorist act by terrorists. And people who are promoting this idea that the Israelis are completely, wrong in every aspect of this war probably have forgotten our experience in places like Iran or Iraq, where we're fighting house to house. There are civilian casualties. The terrorists who have the advantage on the ground are using the civilians as a bargaining chip, as a card in a war. All right, so I'm being very hard here because I think there are an enormous amount of really bad things going on, which are going to basically send the Israelis off into exactly what you thought about, called the Samson Option, or called, as some people have characterized it in history, the Masada complex, i.e., we're alone, we're desperate, screw all of you, we're just going to blow up the world, all right? That is very, very dangerous, and Trump realizes that. Get rid of your illusions about, a two-state solution in the form of the Oslo Accords. Why didn't that work? Why didn't Rabin's plan and the great opening with Arafat work? Well, because we were fighting over inches of contested territory, literally inches of contested territory, meaning I sacrificed my life on either side of this for an inch of territory. The thing is insane. It's crazy. So what Trump is trying to do here, and you can't deal with it from the standpoint of saying, oh, we're going to wag our finger here and condemn Israel, and that's somehow going to matter. It doesn't matter in religious warfare. People are being driven by fanaticism on both sides. You've got to find a solution which is above both sides. That's what the Abraham Accords were all about. Instead of all of the Arab countries saying, because of Palestine, we're going to essentially never recognize the Israeli state and be in a permanent state of war with them, Trump negotiated a real basis saying, okay, recognize Israel, now come in and help with the economic development of the entire area. If you actually look at the Abraham Accords, as opposed to everybody who criticizes Trump on this, you haven't looked at the Abraham Accords and what was actually set forth there in terms of development proposals. Biden screwed that up, and frankly, so did Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair is in this because he was the former head of the so-called quartet, trying to negotiate things here on behalf of all sorts of people, including Russia. He is a horrible person. There's all kinds of stuff that I could say about him in terms of the fact that he's probably the world's leading sponsor of religious warfare, because he said we should change all international law to actually kill what was called the Westphalian principle, the Peace of Westphalia. The last time that we actually settled a religious war. Well, how do we settle that? The Peace of Westphalia. What's the principle of that? You have to look, both sides have to look at the advantage of the other. You have to look at the advantage of the other and actually figure out a way to get both sides cooperative in a vision for the future, which has very little to do with the past. So he's terrible, all right? But this is where the ironies of history actually come in. He is very, very close to the UAE. In fact, you could argue that he's gotten rich and become a billionaire through his relationship with the United Arab Emirates. Who were the first signers of the Abraham Accords? Who were the people who pushed this stuff through in the Arab world? The UAE. All right. So that's why he's in there with Kushner at this point, because the UAE, for whatever reason that goes on in their heads, actually think that his contacts can help them establish an overall framework for dealing with Gaza after the conflict ends. Right now, Trump has put a new peace proposal on the table as of 24 hours ago. He has said to all sides, this now has to end. This now has to end. Hamas, release all the hostages. Netanyahu, if you go for annexing the West Bank, which is what the most recent push was from these dumbass, I'm sorry, but, these stupid Europeans, they created the basis for, Netanyahu saying, okay, in retaliation for recognizing a Palestinian state, we're now going to make that impossible by annexing areas of the West Bank. If you know the history, that's exactly what he tried last time, and that's what Trump outflanked by creating the Abraham Accords. He stopped that in order to create the Abraham Accords. Right now, the UAE just said to Israel, if you do that, we're out. We're back to all-out war in the Middle East with all of the Arab states no longer in the Abraham Accords, all right, but actually declining to recognize the validity of Israel at all. So, we're at a very critical point here, but posturing, as the Europeans are doing, around having the moral high ground in what is a war between religious fanatics is not my idea of how you actually get to a solution.
I'll just throw in one other thing, because I think it's going to be a theme we see throughout this. Think about what Barbara just went through, and think about the difference between taking a position and the proper position and actually intervening into a very complicated historical dynamic and constantly figuring out how to outflank the system that the empire has set up. And I think we're going to see this in other questions in terms of connect those. This person is connected to that person, therefore this means that. No, it doesn't. There may be an actual dynamic that is putting both of those people in the same domain, which you can draw a conclusion from. But the knee bone connected to the thigh bone is not how you actually intervene in the world. Your leg moves not because the knee bone is connected to the thigh bone. Your leg moves because your mind says, I'm going to move my leg.
Thank you. I'm actually going to take a question from the chat that's on this thing from Rick Bowser. He says, I think you're mistaken. You're making it complicated. It's genocide. So you admit the British took Palestinian land and gave it to the Jews, and they're conducting a genocide. So I think, if anything, the British are actually conducting the genocide, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously think that the level of civilian casualties going on in this type of warfare is awful. Yes, there's certain people in Israel who actually say we're conducting an ethnic cleansing, but I don't think that's what most people in Israel actually think they're doing. All right, and you can't solve this by picking a side. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. On the other side, you had October 7th. And, the British have done a very good job, quite frankly, in the propaganda around October 7th, and actually saying, no, not that many Jews were killed, and what the hell, the Jews deserved it in some sense. No, you created, Hamas created an entire mess. And, you can't actually emotionally, get involved at that kind of level in this thing. Obviously, as Trump said, these are souls who are being killed. These are children who are being killed. These are women who are being killed. All of that is happening, but that's what happens in a war of this type. Once you set off a religious war, this is what happens. It is not, I'm not making it complicated. You are, by refusing to recognize the nature of religious warfare. All right. I'm fanatically committed to the fact that God is telling me to do this. All right. I think I'm answering the call of God here in what I'm doing. All right. That's what both sides think. All right. So, no, I'm not making it that complicated. I'm simply pointing out the dynamic that you're not recognizing.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, if you're joining us for the first time, thank you for tuning in. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer and editor with Promethean Action. We do 3 political updates a week. So Barbara and Susan together do 3 updates a week, plus we have this one live show. So we have 4 videos a week. Please like and subscribe if you're joining us for the first time. The questions that we take generally come from our newsletter subscribers. So I've been putting that link down at the bottom of the screen. Please subscribe to our newsletter. It allows us to stay in contact outside of the control of YouTube. I love people that come into chat and just say dumb things. It's like, oh, okay. All right. So we're going to go to the next question here. That's, I think, actually relevant for most Americans, especially younger ones. Do you think that the housing market will make a comeback? Thank you, Antonio. I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. Treasury Secretary Bessent, in his interview, I think it was on Labor Day or over the weekend, at a diner in Virginia, made the point that it is very probable that the Trump administration is going to declare a national emergency to actually deal with the housing question. The housing question, like so much else, is a combination of a variety of factors. One of the most obvious that everybody in the administration is hammering away at is high interest rates, thanks to the fact that Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve continue to want to sabotage Trump's policies. That adds to the cost of getting a house in terms of a high mortgage. That's number one. Number two, we all, I think people probably know, a lot of the hedge funds have stepped in. They've bought in a lot of the housing stock, and they want to they're turning it into rental housing. And yes, that is part of the World Economic Forum overall approach to making sure that nobody will ever be able to own anything. But then you also have, obviously, the question of supply. And that gets to, various components here in the United States in terms of our logging industry, unfettering it. You also have a question of skilled trades to actually build houses. So I don't know exactly what and obviously there's also steps that can be taken. The current head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Bill Pulte, is clearly Trump's kind of hitman on this, in the sense that, he went after Jerome Powell and demanded that he resign. This is not normally what a head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac says. So I think he's going to probably play a major role in this question. But I think they're taking it on. I can't forecast exactly what steps will be a part of this, but Trump is very focused on this. And in fact, back when he was running for president, he launched a whole series of policies called Agenda 47. And one of them was precisely around the question of ensuring that young people will have the opportunity to buy a starter house. And one of the things he proposed in there, even though he hasn't really picked up on it too much since he became president, is building brand new cities, calling them freedom cities. Now, idiots say they're the World Economic Forum's 15-minute cities. I don't know why they would think that. But he's talking about taking vast areas of federal land, which have basically been cordoned off by the British imperial environmental outlook and not allowed to develop over the past 100 years, and figuring out places where you could build vibrant, modern, new cities that would be hubs, as he said, of science and technology, but would also ensure that you actually have affordable housing for young families. So yes, I do think it will come back as long as we give Donald Trump the backing that he needs to carry out his economic policy.
Thank you. Barbara, would you like to say anything? You good?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. I just want to give a quick shout out here to Juanita Rosas and Melody Hart. Thank you very much, ladies, for your support. We really appreciate the super chats. Okay, let's actually get to the next question, because the next set of questions, because it's actually kind of related to what you were just discussing with the new cities and digital control. So the next three questions are going to be on the issue of, you'll see. Here, let's just move to it. So number 9, thank you for all you are doing to inform us. Where do you see the digital control grid go? It seems like Trump has allowed too much private tech into the government. Palantir is a private corporation, but has great control over the tech being utilized. Will this soon lock us into corporate control over humans and the digital social control grid? Thank you, Suzanne. Then next question is from Famous Seamus. Is JD Vance really the man for the job? Rumors are circulating he is a plant and appears to have come out of nowhere. Could the chief of staff be an option? He seems very capable. Number 2, Trump's close relationship with Palantir is worrying. Why is Trump pushing the real ID agenda? And number 11, Team PA, thank you for your efforts to help save the country. We all agree that President Trump is basically doing a stellar job, but I haven't heard PA address the issue of technocracy. With DJT surrounding himself with tech bros, Theo Musk, Sachs, etc., and with recent developments RE tech within the government, i.e. stablecoin and a Genius Act, I think this warrants evaluation. Well, let me just say something on the real ID thing. I think that was way before Trump, but the reason why they had to do the real ID is because states were just diluting their identification so much. I think the federal government was trying to get some kind of handle on getting some kind of standardized identity system across the United States and letting some states basically do whatever they want. So, Barbara and Susan.
Well, I think that Trump has made very clear that we're not going to be a European or a Chinese style technocracy. You know, if you actually read the Genius Act or you look at stablecoin, what's being talked about in terms of cryptocurrency is interesting. I don't totally understand it, but it's far less dangerous than other forms of crypto which are out there on the so-called free market, because stablecoin has to have a one-to-one relationship to the US dollar. And the Genius Act is similarly looking to actually regulate crypto in a fairly decent way. So you've got this entire development out there because people are looking for an alternative to our rigged Federal Reserve and banking system. And essentially what's happening is that they've said, I don't want to be debanked. I don't want to actually have this problem that Trump had and a lot of other people have experienced for their political beliefs. And I really hate the mega banks. So I'm looking to try and see if there's a system here which gives me a little bit more freedom and a little bit more confidence that I'm not going to be screwed by a financial catastrophe. Does crypto give that? Well, we'll just have to see as it evolves. But right now it's tied to the dollar and deliberately set up to strengthen the dollar as opposed to a lot of the other alternatives which are out there. Regarding, you know, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and you know, Mr. Sachs, okay, These are very different people. They're not like, yes, they're all from Silicon Valley in one form or another. That's how they made their money. Peter Thiel, I have, a lot of problems with looking at what he fundamentally says he believes in. Palantir is obviously a major private surveillance operation being used by the Defense Department and being used by law enforcement. And the question really is going to be, as we go about dismantling what I'll call the Patriot Act environment of surveillance, what actually started after 9/11, what are we going to do about that kind of surveillance? How are we going to ensure that for US citizens, at the very least, any surveillance like that requires a warrant consistent with the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution? That's presently what Congress refuses to pass in this entire debate around surveillance. And I put the onus for that on Congress, not on the tech bros. Elon Musk is talking about going to the moon and Mars, which are a whole different kettle of fish in terms of how you actually develop your future technologies. Just like the Apollo program, when we went to the moon, gave us all types of spin-offs into the economy, which actually helped productivity and helped create things in the economy. Now we're looking at the next journey for mankind, going to the moon and to Mars and basically living there. And we're going to discover all sorts of things along the way, which are going to benefit us in the real economy. David Sachs, he's the guy who's actually sitting up on top there and looking at this entire thing around AI, which we have to do. All right, no ifs, ands, or buts about it from the standpoint of remaining a dominant economic force in the world, and saying, what's the pitfalls here in terms of problems that can come up? For example, ChatGPT, and I point this out to you to show you that these are not all the same people. Musk is not just in competition with Sam Altman in ChatGPT. He thinks ChatGPT is extremely dangerous. And I agree with him on that, all right? Because you just had a recent article which Matt Taibbi covered, where a kid actually committed suicide because ChatGPT collaborated with him on his quest to actually commit suicide and provided all of the elements he was wondering about in order to actually do the act. I'm pointing that out to you because David Sachs has the responsibility for actually ensuring that that does not happen. But a free market of AI could lead to precisely that result without the type of regulation which Trump is actually bringing into being. So there's a lot of stuff about, transhumanism and all this other crap that came out of Davos and of the more utopian forms of Silicon Valley, which obviously didn't help productivity one bit. And the big question about all of this AI, is it really going to increase productivity? That's the issue. How do you use it to increase human productivity, which is the keystone issue in thinking about all of this? If it fails to, actually increase productivity, but is simply another way for massive, communication and potential surveillance, like, what's involved in the social credit system, then, we've got a real problem. But I think that it's really a technology which is coming into being, which is a tool that human beings have to figure out how they want to regulate. I'm not that scared of it. I think it can be profoundly useful, but you've got to understand the relationship to human beings. And, a lot of this is really being psyched up at this point on the internet and elsewhere, saying that everything involved in this is somehow transhumanism. Well, it's only transhumanism if you believe that all that human beings are is machines, or if you believe that all that human beings are is like closed biological systems. if you actually understand that human beings are made in the image of God and are intended to participate in his creation, you can place it in the right kind of framework, which is as a tool to help your productivity. So that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing in terms of J.D. Vance. I was at the Republican National Convention that Monday morning on the floor when we found out that J.D. was the choice. And I said to myself, okay, this revolution can really succeed. But I just want to point again to this question of methodology involved in the question. You know, J.D. Vance is connected to Palantir, therefore. That is not how the world works. You have to look at a person. You have to see how they act, how they respond. What are they doing? I have seen nothing since J.D. Vance came into the vice presidency. I frankly haven't seen anything since he made his Damascus Road conversion and began supporting Donald Trump, that he is prepared, that he is doing anything other than supporting Trump's revolution. Now, hypothetically, at some point, maybe he'll do something that changes that evaluation, but that's how you, I don't think he will, but that's how you evaluate. It's like Elon Musk, you know, when he's head of Doge, everybody's in love with him. Then he gets in a fight with Donald Trump. Now you're supposed to hate him. You know, now I don't know where this situation lands, but you know, stop getting caught in the moment or getting caught in a connecto. This is a historic battle of ideas, and you have to judge from that standpoint. And that's the only way you're going to be able to judge what is going on.
Yeah, BW, a longtime supporter, sent this question in a few minutes ago. Just in case you just addressed this, Elon confuses me. He did good with X, but now he seems to work against Trump. Is he a good guy or is he an op? So
yeah, and he's a human being, you know, who's got an ideology. Some of it is brilliant in terms of his commitment to take mankind into outer space. Some of his ideologies are probably a little bit flawed, you know, in terms of his Milton Friedman orientation. He's a human being. He's a complicated human being. And, you know, frankly, probably there's nobody listening to this call who doesn't have some good ideologies and some bad ideologies. The most important thing is, are you always willing to examine your underlying assumptions?
thank you very much, BW, for sending that in. All right, if you're joining us for the first time, I'm Adam Sturman. I'm a producer with Promethean Action. This is a live show we do every Thursday. We take questions from primarily our email newsletter. So let me just go ahead and pull up the link where you can subscribe. You can just go to prom.ac. You can search the web for Promethean Action, and the subscribe link is also in the description to this video. If you haven't yet, also please like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet already. Okay, the next three questions are actually very closely related to what we were just talking about. It's going to be on IRS, the Federal Reserve, and crypto. So let me get to the next one here. Okay. Is buying cryptocurrency a must to survive Trump's transition of the dollar away from the Federal Reserve? Thank you, Debbie. Do you think President Trump will end the IRS and Federal Reserve? Is this the signal we are getting? We know that the federal income tax was supposed to be 3% and temporary. He said he wants the External Revenue Service to receive tariff income. Is this a signal to end IRS? He recently said he wants to abolish property tax. Is this possible? Thank you for your updates and opening our eyes. I love them. Thank you, Howard. Next one is from Barbara. With a changeover from the Federal Reserve banking system to a national banking system, is our current savings, IRAs, and checking accounts in jeopardy? How do we protect our savings money on hand if banks are headed for failure? And here's the last one in this group. Thank you, Barbara. And finally, what was the genesis of the Federal Reserve? Did it have anything to do with the famous boat that sank, or had it something to do with Jekyll Island? or these famous named families, Wells Fargo, Chase, etc.? Thank you, Michael. I think are you talking about the Titanic sinking? I think that's what you're referring to, which actually did happen around that time. Thank you for these questions. So I'll open up the floor to Barbara and Susan.
You want me to take these, Susan?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. All right. I'll start with the Federal Reserve. It was actually a British orchestrated plot against the United States to control our finances by making it very difficult to issue credit to productive industry and to favor Wall Street. What most people don't realize is that Wall Street largely consisted of banks which had British branches even at that point in time. They were all associated with the British Empire. And, you know, the Wilson administration, as Susan can go into at great length, was essentially a captive of the British Crown. And they brought in this whole notion that experts and technocrats should be running the money supply. Really, the bankers of Wall Street should be running the money supply, which is how the Fed actually works, as opposed to what the Constitution says, which that's a joint responsibility of the President of the United States and the U.S. Congress. So that's the genesis of the Federal Reserve. I don't think that Donald Trump is trying to drive the dollar away from the Federal Reserve. I think that's a false notion. He is a defender of the dollar. And, you know, with respect to actually protecting your savings and, you know, everything else, I don't think there's any kind of real danger, which, you know, he's proposing. What he wants to do with the Fed is get it back to the very limited, at least as I understand it right now, the limited responsibility for determining monetary supply and or interest rates, and get rid of all of the drift of all of these other functions which the Fed has assumed, primarily their so-called responsibility for full employment, which has resulted in all sorts of crazy maneuvers by them on behalf of Wall Street's elite. I don't know whether I'm missing any part of those questions at this point in what I just answered.
Well, I'll just add a few things, around this one. Well, first of all, I don't think that people's savings accounts are in jeopardy in terms of any potential transition away from a purely central banking system. In fact, any transition, which I think is going to be gradual, I think one of its primary purposes is going to be to protect people's savings and so on. I think Trump is very focused on that. What I've said before is I think what Trump is trying to do is, first of all, open the dialogue, which he's clearly done in a way that we have not seen in my lifetime, in terms of the fact that the Federal Reserve is currently acting as a kind of rogue independent operation. I think he's made that abundantly clear in his attacks on Jerome Powell and his firing of Lisa Cook. We'll have to see how the courts ultimately resolve that. I think when you look at various discussions that other people of his administration have had last week, there were discussions by Hassert and Lutnick talking about variously things like a sovereign wealth fund or an economic security fund. I don't think that we're in any position to just turn the lever off the Federal Reserve, as Barbara said, because it's extremely complicated and you have to know the principles and be prepared to put an entirely new system in place. I think there's going to be a series of reforms of the Federal Reserve as an interim step. I think ultimately Trump does want to move to a pre-1913 situation. He's pointed to McKinley. He's pointed to the fact that we didn't have an income tax until 1913. He's pointed to the fact that when you use the American system, he talks about it from the standpoint of tariffs. You don't need an IRS. Implicitly, you don't need a Federal Reserve. So I think where we are right now in this process is really an educational process, while he brings in some of his people and starts to nibble away at the structures that have been put in place for now 112 years since the Federal Reserve was put in place.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add all the changes that people want to get done, like getting rid of the IRS or reforming the Fed. The reality is we need to win Congress for that, right? You need to have serious control of the House and serious control of the Senate. So I think Trump definitely wants to go in this direction, but we're hanging on in Congress by a literal thread, and there's no guarantee that 2026 is going to be a slam dunk either.
Actually, Adam, could you share the screen briefly?
Yes, here, I'll switch to you.
Okay. Just for the person who asked the question about the origin of the Fed, and for everybody who's asking these questions, I do recommend people go to the Promethean Action website. This is under the Toolkit tab. We have an excellent ebook, What President Trump Can Do with the American System 2.0. And the first chapter takes on the question of national banking versus central banking. The follow-up chapters, I think, will challenge people even more. Because implicit in most people's economic debates, discussions, is you're thinking from the standpoint of money, measuring the economy from the standpoint of money. Do I have enough, and so on. And what is the government doing with the money, and so on. Money should just merely be a means of exchange. And if that's the case, if money isn't your metric, what is your metric for growing your economy? And the bulk of this ebook actually addresses that, I think, in a very challenging way. And I encourage people to get the ebook and to study it.
Thank you, Susan. So yeah, if you want to get the ebook, you can search for Promethean Action Toolkit on the web, or you can go to prom.ac and right on the main menu. If you're on mobile, you'll just have to bring down the menu, but one of those menu items says Toolkit, and this and another pamphlet is available. It's available to everyone. You just have to be a subscriber to our newsletter to download them. Even at the free level, we ask for a suggested contribution, but ultimately, if you want to read it, you can totally get it for free. Okay, so the next set of questions here is going to be on BRICS and the SCO, and we get tons of questions about the BRICS. Okay, let's see, 18, 15. Yes, excuse me. Okay, how does the BRICS alliance help or hurt central bank rule? Thank you, Mike. With the latest developments between China, India, and Russia, the beginning of the fall of the bankers in London, is this the beginning of the fall of bankers in London? Will the final nail in the coffin be the USA joining the BRICS? Thank you, Paul. That's an interesting question. And the last one on this BRICS theme is here from Marilyn. Thank you, Marilyn. I can't help but think President Trump is painting himself and us into a corner. The joining of the BRICS and SCO is very powerful and impressive statement. Yet the genocide continues, and the targeted elimination of the Yemeni cabinet, including the prime minister, in one swoop is disheartening, with no one, including Arab states, saying anything. Is it already determined by geopolitical analysts that there will be a war with Iran by December? I thought this was something Trump did not want. Thank you, Marilyn, for sending in your question. So I'll open the floor to Barbara and Susan.
I'll start in terms of the SCO and BRICS, because I kind of brought that up yesterday in my midweek update. What I didn't bring up in my midweek update is something that President Putin said, because he said it after I had done the midweek update. He reflected on the meeting that took place in China, which was both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and it was also a celebration of the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in the Pacific. And Putin was very clear. He says there were no public attacks on the United States, and there was no private attacks on the United States. So this is one of these, propaganda operations, which comes right out of the book of the British playbook of Geopolitics, which is you have to choose sides. You're either on the side of the United States or you're on the side of this combination of anti-imperial countries. That's not what is going on. And in fact, what I referenced in my midweek yesterday is a fascinating discussion, public discussion, or at least on the record, between President Putin and the Slovak Prime Minister Fico, where Fico talked about how Slovakia is working with Westinghouse to build a new nuclear power plant in Slovakia, and maybe the Russians and the United States could work together with Slovakia. And Putin responded, that's a possibility. And I'm talking to the United States about working together on the power plant in Ukraine, ultimately at a certain point. In other words, the SCO is not some big gang up against the United States. What Trump and now Trump yesterday, Adam, if I could share the screen again. This is the truth that Trump put out yesterday. And I was at an event last night with the Senate candidate here in Michigan, Mike Rogers, who Trump has endorsed. But, Mike Rogers just can't help his neocon side, because he chose to only quote the very last part of this truth. I want to read this truth. Trump said, the big question to be answered is whether or not President Xi will mention the massive amount of support and blood that the United States gave China in order to help it to secure its freedom from a very unfriendly foreign invader, obviously in World War II. Many Americans died in China's quest for victory and glory. I hope they were rightfully honored and remembered. But then he says, may President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day to celebrate, a day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America, President Donald Trump. Now, you notice he's either being ironic in one part of it, or, he's doing two different things in this tweet. It's classic Trump. Say hello to my friends. I hope you have a great celebration. And, while you're conspiring against me. Donald Trump has made very clear, and he did it in the Oval Office 2 days ago when he was asked the same question, is the SCO ganging up on the United States? Are you worried about Putin and, Xi and Kim Jong-un and so on? He says, no, I'm not worried. Because Trump doesn't look at the world the way the British geopoliticians would have you. It's this bloc versus that bloc. He goes country by country. Will there be conflicts with China on trade? You bet. Are there conflicts with Russia in terms of how we're going to settle the Ukraine war? You bet. Are there continuing conflicts with Kim Jong-un? You bet. But Trump takes each one of these country by country and says, I respect you as a sovereign nation with your own interests, which may conflict with ours. That's the purpose of diplomacy. Everything else in terms of blocks is out of the British geopolitical playbook. And I could go on, but maybe Barbara wants to address the four power question as opposed to, I think, a romanticized view of the BRICS.
Yeah. First of all, you got to understand where the concept of the BRICS comes from. It was invented by Goldman Sachs. And you've got to actually think about why would they do that? The issue is, how do you take down the British financial empire? That's the enemy. And what we've always believed is that there are three nations aside from the United States who are critical for that, both because of their population, the level of advancement of their economies, and the enormous economic potential they hold. And the British actually recognized this in the infamous, which we've made infamous, House of Lords report called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order from 2018. They targeted these four nations, specifically the United States, India, China, and Russia, all with different strategies to keep them at each other's throats, for the specific reason that they recognized that if you could get these countries together and develop a community of principles, starting with, we're going to wipe out this entire rules-based post-war order, which has enslaved most of humanity, you're on a completely different footing. And all of that is based on cooperative economic development between these nations. What's happened instead is this idea of the BRICS. We're going to subscribe to the worst aspects of British ideology. We are globalists, all right? We want a global empire. We don't necessarily believe in the sovereignty of nation states being the central part of any governance system. We are also climate fatalists. We actually are 100% on board with the climate agenda, allegedly, although people actually subscribe to it and then they go out and violate it like crazy because they still have to support their populations. So, they've adopted much of the British agenda as, the BRICS were the powerful nations here opposing what they'd like them to do is all oppose the United States. And a lot of the people that I find who are enamored with the BRICS also hate the United States. They really do. Or are Americans who are ashamed of the United States. They don't recognize that without the United States involved in the four powers, the world is screwed. And they don't recognize that without the United States, period, the world is screwed. If you take the present economic situation of the world and you suddenly said the United States is out of it, we're not going to be involved, and not only that, but we collapse because of external pressures, the entire world is going to go through a catastrophe at this point because nobody else has stepped forward to actually say it's our responsibility, as a nation under God, to actually see what we can do for the best of humanity. And we've had that burden, and now it's time, frankly, that we've got to straighten ourselves out, so that instead of trying to impose the so-called order that the British invented on other nations, we become again the example for the world, the beacon of hope and the temple of liberty, just like John Quincy Adams wanted us to be. So that's what I'd say about the BRICS. And I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but I think it's really nonsense.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Susan. Okay, we're almost halfway through. Okay, we honestly, we still have another 27 or 20 to go, so we have to pick it up. But if you're joining us for the first time, my name's Adam. This is a weekly live show we do here at Promethean Action. We're taking questions primarily from our newsletter supporters. So if you're enjoying what you'd like to, if you're enjoying what you're seeing and you'd like to ask a question in the future, I'm going to put the link to subscribe to our free newsletter. It's also in the description, or you can just search for Promethean Action. All the search engines take you directly to us. So get our free newsletter. We'll put the links where you can ask your question for last week. But I also want to pre-sell something. Some of you may have noticed I've been wearing this MAGA 2028 t-shirt. This is not the final design. So this is a test design that I did, but the concept is still the same. I'm doing a MAGA 2028 t-shirt, except I put Donald Trump to replace Teddy Roosevelt there. So, and actually this t-shirt idea came from a supporter a few weeks ago. I've been slowly working on the design. So if you'd like to get updated on when we do this design, we're going to be posting it on our YouTube channel. I'll have it probably back on the show in a week or two. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll definitely put it in the newsletter. So if you're interested in getting this shirt in the future, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. You'll be the first to know when this design goes live. And I'll use if you've already gotten some of our merch, thank you so much to everyone who's purchased some merch. Actually, let me just throw up a 10% off. Here's a coupon code you can use to get 10% off our current merchandise. You can go to that link or scan the QR code. If you purchased the merch, you know that we're using pretty high quality heavyweight t-shirts. They're called Comfort Colors. I've realized now they're much more of a winter t-shirt. So I'll be printing. This is on a lighter summer shirt, but the final design will be on a thicker winter shirt for fall and winter wear. Okay. So I'm going to pull up this next. Excuse me. Next one. Okay. This is going to be a transition. From the website, I could not find out what a subscription costs and the term length. Also, is it possible to mail a check to cover both a PAC donation and the subscription cost for 2 years, with the split being called out on a check? Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
As a treasurer of Promethean PAC, I really would encourage you to use 2 separate checks, because unless you really, you'd have to write a lot to comply with the Federal Election Campaign Act's notion of what they call donative intent. So 2 checks, technically I could take it, but that means I'd have to write you a whole letter back, and you'd have to send it back to me, and we'd go through a whole conniption fit. So the easiest thing to do is 2 checks.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in for people who may not be familiar with the fact that we do have 2 entities. We have a Federal Election Commission regulated political action committee, which Barbara is the treasurer of, to which only American citizens can contribute. And then we have our policy arm, Promethean Action, which is what puts out our newsletter that many of you are familiar with, to which anybody can contribute. In terms of the person's question about subscriptions, we basically just have an annual subscription. And if you go to the subscribe button on Promethean Action, you will see the different options. If there's any questions, just send somebody a message. But I want to get back to the PAC, because as has come up in a number of questions here, and as Adam stressed on the issue of the Federal Reserve, ultimately the answer to most of these questions in terms of fundamental permanent change in the direction of the country is if we can legislate the necessary changes. As we all know, President Trump is doing a lot of his tariffs by executive order, and he's in a battle with the courts over that. The solution to that would be to legislate these tariffs. He was asked that question at the White House the other day, and by some idiot reporter who said, you have a majority in the Senate and the House. Well, he made the point, you need 60 votes to override a filibuster in the Senate. So unless you have 60 votes in the Senate, you cannot do anything terribly controversial. His majority in the House is going to be 1 vote when the Democrats fill a couple of the open seats over the course, I believe, of this year, people who passed away while in office. So the question of building a MAGA Congress, we do not have a MAGA Congress. We barely have a Republican majority, and it is not a MAGA Congress. We have to make a MAGA Congress, and that is up to you. So Promethean PAC has produced this piece of literature. A new Republican Party is rising. It's a half page, just so you can see the size of it, which makes the point that we need, thank you, Adam, I have mine too, which makes the point that we have to build and consolidate this new Republican Party through the midterm elections. This is page 1 of this, and that's the back, where we make very clear, and you can get it right below, the midterm leaflet at prom.ac, midterm 26. There's a black and white downloadable version, which anybody can use. And then there's this beautiful color version, which we encourage people to get from us and use it. Because growing the Republican Party under Trump's vision as the party of workers, the party of the working class, and I'm going to go back to that, is absolutely critical to transforming the Congress into being a MAGA Congress. It's a return to the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln. And the way that there's different ways that you can use this. And I want to show you a very exciting one that we did on Labor Day. We went to the big Labor Day march in Detroit. It's really sort of like the flagship Labor Day march in the country. And there were several thousands of trade unionists, each grouped, electricians, Teamsters, UAW, and so on. And we went to that Labor Day march. And of course, you had a lefty contingent, you had the vanguard workers movement off in a corner, and so on and so forth. And of course, you're supposed to believe that all of these people are locked into the Democratic Party and so on. Well, we found something quite extraordinary. First, there was no hostility to us getting out this half-page flyer. There were maybe 25% of the people we offered it to, when they saw the word Republican on it, said no thanks and gave it back, but not hostile. We got out 400 of these to a march which was maybe, 2,000 to 3,000 people. That's a pretty high percentage. And people were engaged and intrigued about the idea that the Republican Party is becoming the party of working people, because they know the Democratic Party has gone batshit crazy. But we're telling them, yeah, but there is some place which is now welcoming you, which is the Republican Party. So these are just a couple of other pictures of us getting the flyers out to people at the rally. Other things we're doing with the flyer is going to Republican Party meetings. Here's our colleagues in Houston, where one of Promethean Action's leaders just got elected the leadership of a local Republican club called the Pachyderm Club. And there they are. You can see down at the bottom, they're holding the half-page flyer, and again, organizing people around these. So get your copies of this flyer. Use the link at the bottom of the page, or go to Promethean PAC. You'll find it right there on the website. And let's blanket the country with this, because this is how we create a MAGA Congress for Donald Trump.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. I want to ask, we got two things actually. So first, I want to thank Suzanne for your generous super chat. My family is so glad we found Promethean Action, and I'm glad we found you. Everyone hates social media algorithms, but honestly, the fact that the YouTube algorithm matches us with people that actually love what we do and enjoy our mission, I think is really awesome. So I'm glad we were also able to find you, Suzanne. And I want to ask a quick question somebody sent in. I had a hard time understanding it, but I kind of want to ask it anyway. What do you think? Do you think okay if, I think it's Tony Blair and Jared Kushner, mug white Trump? I heard they want to build their resorts and pay people to move out there. Anyone know?
I do. Basically, what is being said, at least from Blair and Kushner, is that they're not into displacement of people in Palestine if they want to stay. They are offering people the ability to go to other contiguous countries and receive payment for that, because Gaza right now is a hellhole. I mean, it's completely destroyed. The Israelis have completely bombed the place into oblivion. So you're walking around, if you're living there, you're walking around in basically an area which is filled with unexploded ordnance and all sorts of other stuff, which endangers you just as much as crazy Netanyahu's bombs do. The idea was to create economic development zones. That's part of what was actually part of the original Abraham Accords, and to get investment from the Gulf states and others into Gaza to actually rebuild it. It's been parodied by being called, the tourist haven. Obviously, tourism is an essential industry for Israel. And, it also would probably be such for a certain section of Gaza. But the overall idea is economic development. So I'll just leave the answer at that.
Thank you, Barbara. If you're tuning in, welcome to our live Q&A show, Promethean Action. We do this every Thursday at the same time. My name's Adam. I'm a producer and editor with Promethean Action, joined with Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda, who both deliver, well, in total, we do a political briefing on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday of every week. And then we do this live show every Thursday. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video. Make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our future videos. And if you want to ask a question, like I will take stuff from the super chats, but we still have another 27 questions to rush through. So if you want to get your question in on the real queue next week, that's the wrong link. You can go to prom.ac or search the web for Promethean Action. The link's also in the description. Just get our free newsletter. I'll send you updates when we do our political briefings and when we do the live Thursday show, plus all the other stuff we write. Okay. So, ladies, I just want to remind you, we still have like 27 or 28 to go. So I'm going to try and pick up the pace here a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to start for our friends from Australia. You have tons of support from Australia. Hey, guys, in relation to the Rome Salute and Australia being a signatory, how do you see this affecting our relationship with the United States of America? Thank you, Paul, from freedomunion.org. I'm not exactly sure what the Rome's is a statue.
I think he's talking about the climate change agreement.
No, I actually looked it up. That's the thing which brings people into the International Criminal Court.
Okay.
Which we're not a member of.
Right.
Barbara, if you want to address that.
It's very simple. We don't believe that there should be an international criminal court outside the realm of, each state's international laws. Going after people for what they consider to be, war crimes or other such things. So I don't think it has a direct effect. We're obviously opposed to it. Australia is obviously a part of it. But we have our differences on many things. I don't think this is a major point of difference.
Thank you. Okay, next question. The British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was devoted to her belief in a free society derived from religion, not from the state. Her belief was rooted in the common law being greater than the king, and that these rights come from God, and no king or state is entitled to set them aside. I believe the American Constitution arose from the same spirit. My question is, how did you view Mrs. Thatcher's rule in relation to imperialism? And do you see any similarities between her and President Trump? Thank you very much for your honest question, Anne. We appreciate it.
I'll take that. I have to profoundly disagree with you in terms of what Margaret Thatcher's fundamental beliefs were. I think that what she's stating there is largely a cover for the fact that she basically had one fundamental belief: how to increase the power of the City of London financially in the world. And that's what she did. That's what the great, so-called explosion was about in terms of her, taking apart what was left of the British social safety net and implementing the ideas of the Mount Pelerin Society directly in Britain and also throughout the world. You can basically research her and find her playing a major role in the looting of Russia, which you can make a very sound argument for has led to the present circumstance with Russia and Ukraine. Basically saying we're not just going to end the Cold War, we're going to screw any type of viable relationship with Russia or Germany, both of which she warred against, with the idea that speculative finance should rule the world, and all the post-war order she was a firm advocate of. Do I think she has any similarity with Trump? No, I don't. She was an imperialist, of the highest order. All of her economic policies, as I said before, came from the Mount Pelerin Society. That's Milton Friedman. That's, all of the, crazy British economists behind the Big Bang, like Anthony Fisher. and the Institute for Economic Affairs. That's the Heritage Foundation in its original incarnation in the United States. And it's led to economic dissolution wherever it has been tried. So unfortunately, I have a pretty strong answer to that. But I think, the question is, you've got to really look at what she did from a little bit different standpoint in terms of when it happened and why it happened. And you can argue that, that particularly the war in Kuwait and the war in Iraq stem directly from her and her policies. So and we have here also, just to add one further nasty, evil thing, she and Ronald Reagan basically invented what's called the National Endowment for Democracy, a similar institution in Britain, for the purpose of running color revolutions throughout the world. So that gives you my take on what the woman's fundamental character was about. And, I don't think that your description of her is really accurate in terms of what she did. She may have said that, but that's not what she did.
Thank you. And thank you, Anne, for really asking your honest question. And we'll do our best to give you our honest answers in return. So thank you for sending that in. Okay, next question is a common one we get all the time. When will Adam Schiff be investigated for the Russian collusion hoax? Man, I could put, when will X be indicted for X, for Y? This has become when will so-and-so become indicted for this terrible thing that's been done? Okay, so we get a lot of these. Will Americans who are affected able to testify? I was working in experimental and validation for Pratt & Whitney engines on a joint Russian MC-21-300 and a Cold War Army vet, 3 years Iron Curtain. Thank you, Alfred. So what do we tell people that are just so upset that not enough judicial action's being taken?
The question for everybody is, take your civics lessons a little bit and understand what it takes to put together a legal case. And whether or not, if you're looking at Adam Schiff, he's going to be able to claim a privilege as a member of Congress for everything he did under the speech and debate clause. And, basically they got him under the spotlight now for mortgage fraud, which I think is good. He's being investigated for all of his various financial dealings, which I hope goes somewhere. He's being, actually investigated under FARA, which is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And we'll see where it goes. The question is, can you make a legal case, or can you actually punish him in some other way? And you see both things going on in what is really a war. And just so you understand it, there is a war going on in Washington, where Trump is dismantling the deep state, is dismantling all of its institutions. But again, the issue is Congress. For example, I told you about the National Endowment for Democracy, all right, the color revolution machine. That's who brought that, and its associated NGOs is what brought about the Russian collusion hoax in reality, in terms of funding it and everything else. Now, there are named people who actually played a significant role in both the FBI and CIA. All of their security clearances have already been taken away. You can't take that away from a member of a senator in the United States Senate. And that's kind of how that one goes. But, the point is that right now, Trump already tried to just completely destroy the National Endowment for Democracy. He wanted to completely defund it in Congress. He wants to defund, through a pocket rescission, which is going on now in Congress, a lot of the crazy foreign aid projects, which, are wasting tons and tons of money on woke projects and were essential to actually taking him down. Congress came back and actually fully funded the NED, basically telling the president, screw you. So, again, this is the question that Susan raised about a Trumpian Congress. There's lots of things that can be done with investigations and so forth and so on, but you've got to actually have a very clear case. You got to figure out where you're going to bring it. Going to bring it in DC? No, completely infect the judges and juries. All right, a DC jury just refused to indict, an immigrant who had committed murder. All right, take that for what it's worth. You're not going to bring the case against the deep state in Washington, D.C. So you've got to actually figure out how you're going to get venue in a district which will at least give you a shot fairly at bringing a viable prosecution. Right now, there are certain places in the country that are so unhinged that you just know that if you brought a prosecution there, you'd probably fail. Well, we can't fail if we're going to bring a prosecution on this particular matter. So there's two things going on. One is these guys who are in the intelligence community are being deprived of the capacity to make a living, which is fine and dandy with me. That's what a security clearance gives them. All right. Second, there is a major case which is being investigated and put together at this point in time through the Justice Department concerning the entire conspiracy against Trump going all the way up to 2024. Whether that's one case or it ends up being separate cases because you make a judgment that you're more likely to get convictions if you bring a less huge case, that will be figured out in the course of the investigation. But I'm very confident that people are serious. This is going on. And you got to understand that people aren't sitting still. These guys are shooting back. And, that's essentially what's going on around the entire thing at this point.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we still have like 20 questions left, so I'm going to try and go through them a little quicker here. Would you expand on the Monroe Doctrine? What is it and how is it applied, and are we using it here and now? We will be reading your transcripts and newsletter, but we'll abstain from listening not for now. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marie, for your question. Monroe Doctrine?
I'll make it short and sweet. Under President Monroe and really under the authorship of John Quincy Adams, this was intended to do one thing: keep the British Empire out of the Western Hemisphere, period. Under subsequent presidents, when we started to ape the British Empire and become imperialists in a certain way on behalf of empire ourselves, it was distorted beyond its original intent, particularly if you look at the war on Malvinas and against Argentina some time ago. So are we using it in the best sense? I would say that, we're essentially saying we would like to see no Chinese occupation of the Western Hemisphere. That seems to be the brunt of what Trump is trying to do here. And, he's trying to clean out, in terms of the Western Hemisphere, what has been, the actual problem, which is most of these countries have been completely brought to their knees and have become narco states. And so the war on drugs, I think, is going to determine, what happens with the Monroe Doctrine in an appropriate sense in the future.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, the next question is rather specific, but we definitely support what RFK is trying to do. And this is from Mary, who says who is an MD. She says, do you support the use of sewage sludge on farms that contain PFAS, among other known chemicals damaging to health? Do you support immunity from liability for pesticide companies, akin to the current liability for vaccine manufacturers? We live in an age of toxins which can damage the physical foundation of human creativity. Absolutely. Thank you for your work, and thank you, Mary, for your question. So I think both of you have something to say on the issue.
Well, I can just even start out with the PFAS question. We have a huge problem of that here in Michigan. Whole section of Upper Michigan, where there was, I believe, a Air Force or Army base, is extremely contaminated. So no, I mean, this should not be any part of our agricultural cycle. And I certainly believe that the entire big pharma, big ag, big everything can no longer be left off the hook in terms of what they are doing. That being said, and I think Barbara will probably want to expand on this, we have just drifted so far away from any standard of real science, and therefore the population is extremely distrustful, I think. And I think the question of reestablishing an actual scientific methodology and scientific rigor in terms of ultimately making decisions on all of these things is absolutely vital.
I think all of these things have to be independently investigated. In terms of no, I don't support immunity from liability. For either the vaccines or the pesticide companies, but does that get resolved by trial lawyers bringing suits? I think that the issue is we've got to actually have some form of absolute regulation and scientific tests as to what's, damaging and what's not. DDT is a good example of something which should have never been banned, quite frankly, but was on the basis of some environmental hysteria. So we've got to test scientifically and know what we're talking about, and that's not presently happening at all.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. A quick reminder to everyone, if you're tuning in for the first time, my name is Adam. I'm a producer and editor with Promethean Action. We hold these live broadcasts once a week, every Thursday. If you want to get your question into the queue, please, there's a link in the description of this video. You can search for Promethean Action, get our free newsletter. We'll keep you up to date and we can stay in contact outside of YouTube's control. All right, so next question. Very short and sweet. Please comment on the likelihood that Putin wants to invade the rest of the EU. Many thanks in advance. And thank you, Krista, for your question.
Why would he want it? No, he doesn't want to.
Thank you. Okay. And the next one, in your view, why did FDR confiscate gold? What are the other leading theories, and how does FDR's confiscation of gold fit with the American system of economics? Thank you for your question, Shumba.
Well, I'll take the first pass at it, although I'm not the world's leading expert. I think people have to recognize that the question of a strict gold standard for your currency is not what the American system necessitates. What you need to have is some means by which you're tethering the increase of your currency to the increase of physical production. What we had in the United States up until between World War II and 1971 was a gold reserve standard. It wasn't a strict gold standard. In other words, it wasn't a one-for-one gold for dollar. Because the problem you have with a one-for-one gold for dollar, and I believe this is what Franklin Roosevelt was dealing with, what if the British have cornered the market on gold? They can basically screw you. And I think what I understand what Franklin Roosevelt was dealing with was a situation similar to that, where his ability to issue the kind of credit that was needed to build our way out of the Depression was constrained by the British control of the gold market. And he had to free the United States up from this rigid straitjacket to being able to actually activate this productive economy. That's my understanding, Barbara. I don't know if you have a correction or addition.
I don't really. If you look at the coverage at the time, you'll find that Wall Street was 100% against the confiscation of gold and keeping the gold standard for a reason, i.e., they controlled it. The British were abandoning, because of the Depression, the British were abandoning the gold standard, but insisting that the United States keep to it, Well, why was that? That's because they wanted to screw us. And what was happening was that people were so panicked about the gold, about the banks collapsing, that they were hoarding gold, and the banks were losing their reserves. And if he hadn't done that, the banks would have collapsed. So that's really what it was all about. But the main thing you need to look at is what Susan just said. How is your whatever means of exchange you're using tethered to actual productivity? And what FDR had to do was get the economy going again by being able to issue credit for productive activities. And if he kept to the gold standard, he would not be able to do that.
Thank you. Okay. Next question is from Syed. Great job, ladies. What was the reasoning behind POTUS inviting Field Marshal Asim Munir to lunch at the White House? It's an unprecedented move. No U.S. president has ever invited a Pakistani army chief for a private, off-the-record meeting at the White House. What role is Pakistan playing in this situation, especially considering Pakistan's openly declared support for the Persians? Is POTUS trying to have ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan released from jail, who is a puppet of George Soros? Thank you, Syed. I don't know the dynamics of this international question.
I don't either. Basically, as you probably know, Syed, the Pakistani army chief runs Pakistan. And Pakistan has been, a premier British operation in that entire area. And so I don't know what Trump has in mind here. He would meet with the devil, I believe, if it meant he could bring peace and stability to any area of the world. And that's all I can really say about it.
Thank you. That's still very helpful. All right, this is a longer question from Russell on the issue of ChatGPT and these quote unquote LLM systems. Okay, so this is a quick summary here. I would like to express serious concern regarding the design of AI like ChatGPT and the potential societal and ethical risks associated with its use of first-person pronouns such as I and I'm. This design choice risks blurring the distinction between human and AI, which could lead to undue trust, reliance, and emotional attachment to the system. Maintaining a clear separation between humans and AI is a vital public safety and ethical for AI deployment. Recommendations like eliminate human identifying pronouns in AI output, using neutral descriptors like this system or this model, systemically integrate user feedback on moral concerns and potential misuse of AI into model updates. Okay, can you help me get the appropriate government personnel to make them aware of my thoughts? I would love to work on this with our government, even President Trump. I'm a former vice president, Westinghouse G and Exelon. My experience would play right into regulatory control for the appropriate safety and control of AI implementation. Thank you, Russell, for your question or comments.
I think you've hit on something which is, pretty simple, but also very brilliant, as many brilliant ideas actually are. The person you want to contact is David Sachs at the White House. He's basically the kind of czar on all things AI, and I think he would really be fascinated by your question and idea.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the next one, knock the rest of these out. What is your take on the USA going back to the gold standard for nation-to-nation settlements? That way, everyone is on a level playing field, but still keep or bring on a new dollar for local acceptance. Or could we exchange silver into US, some kind of US token or prepaid card, or buy gold outright silver? I have tons of ideas for this to happen. Thank you, Andrea. I know a lot of people do. And in the end, we mentioned this before, a lot of this depends on having control of the House and the Senate.
Yeah, I think I addressed this a few questions ago. A rigorous gold standard straitjackets you to the amount of that precious metal you may happen to have. And that's not how the American system works. The question of wealth actually can't be measured from the standpoint of things. It has to be measured from the standpoint of the increasing ability of the human mind to intervene on and improve the universe. And that is not something you're going to codify. So I think people have to kind of rethink where they think economic security lies. It doesn't lie in having a pile of gold or silver or anything like that in the basement. It lies in actually having a economically sovereign, progressing economy, which is the intention of the American system, and I believe what Donald Trump is trying to do.
Thank you, Susan. Okay. How involved do you think the UN is in trying to bring about a one world government and the illegal immigration crisis in Europe and UK? Thank you, Michael.
Very. That's the only thing to say. I mean, yeah, they're critical to this. It's really a mess, and they are being used directly by the World Economic Forum, by all of these globalist institutions, to push the climate agenda, to push open borders, to push the idea that they are the center of one world government. And I'll just leave my answer at that.
Thank you.
And Adam, while you're going to the next question, I want to give a shout out to Jerry Lee in Florida.
Okay.
Who ordered some of our flyers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll get them out to you in the next few days for sure. Okay, we're going through these real quick now. Trump imposed a 50% tariff on India because India purchases Russian oil. Is Trump weaponizing tariffs against nations that trade with Russia to pressure Putin into compromising Russia's demands on Ukraine? MAGA for a community of principle. Thank you, Tom.
To the extent that it actually is done to try and pressure Putin, it's a compromise with the neocons in the Senate, and their entire idea that somehow pressuring Russia around tariffs and or sanctions is going to produce a different result in terms of Russia achieving its war aims. I believe, however, that the tariff on India is much more based on difficulties that India has thrown up with tariffs and otherwise, because I don't want, Modi is really a patriot of his nation. He has farmers all over India to protect who are vital to whether his economy works or not. He's not looking forward to someone coming in and flooding the country with cheaper goods, including China. So that's the reason why India has all of these big barriers to trade. And I think it's going to get resolved by, again, not playing the British game of being at each other's throats and at the throat of the United States, but actually recognizing the common enemy here, which is the British financial empire.
Thank you. Actually, you know what? I should have asked this next question with it, which again, it was basically the same question, but I'll just read it real quick. Why are we punishing India with tariffs for buying oil from Russia? We surely would sell energy at a much higher price than Russia is doing. Russia will not care anyway. Isn't there a great alliance between Trump and Putin? I would like to see a real strategy from our government. I have a hard time believing that this is to confuse the globalists. I consider this tariff against India a real mistake.
I'll just add, I mean, Trump has made very clear India does have some of the highest tariff barriers in the world. So that's part of the overall equation. And I would just underscore what Barbara said. He's dealing with a bunch of lunatics in the Senate. But I think you're right. There is an alliance between Putin and Trump. And I think both of them and parts of their government sometimes have to say things to deal with other parts of their government where they both know that this is not, the ultimate negotiating position from the other side.
Thank you. I want to take a quick follow-up question here. I believe it's Amy Stew, who asked a question a few minutes ago. Per your answer on Margaret Thatcher, did the past queen have an imperialism belief as she espoused her strong Christianity? So yeah, did the past queen have an imperialism belief? Absolutely. And you can still say you're a strong Christian and still push imperialism.
As did most of the British imperialists throughout their
Yeah.
entire lives.
All right, I'll just move on to the next one. So thank you for your question. She was an imperialist. Okay. Another short and quick one. Isn't it vital to U.S. sovereignty for the U.S. to exit the United Nations? Thank you, Julie.
No, what you want to do is have the ability to watch what they're doing, and you never want to just shove your enemy aside. You want to basically infiltrate them if you can, to use the ability to talk there, which is limited, but nonetheless to get your views across to these people. It's a valuable megaphone for us. And secondly, you got to monitor what the hell they're doing. So no, I don't think we should leave the United Nations. We should just recognize what a mess it actually is.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Again, another short and sweet one. How did it happen that Trump actually got elected in 2024 with all the voter fraud methods that were used against him in 2020?
I'll
Thank
take
you,
that
Eric.
one. Yeah. Too big to rig. Trump said it, we did it. And, I'll use Michigan as a case study. We brought out voters that the Democrats did not count on. They have baked into their vote fraud operation a certain expectation of who's going to come out and vote for Trump. Let's say you mobilize all the Republicans, including all the low propensity Republicans. Well, the Democrats are ready for that. But that's not more than that came out and voted in 2024 in Michigan. Blue collar workers, Muslim Americans swamped them. And the fact that we boosted the vote in a blue county like Wayne County, Michigan, which is where I am, so much. I mean, everyone knows the stories of the pizza boxes, on the windows, at the at TCF, as it was called then, now Huntington Place, in 2020, that covered up for the vote fraud that was going, the flood of absentee ballots that came in the middle of the night, and so on and so forth. They didn't do that in 2024 because fairly early on they saw how much Trump was getting in Wayne County. Didn't win, didn't get 40%, didn't need to. We made it so much bigger than what the Democrats expected. There was no way in the world their operations could have overwhelmed that. And they threw in the towel, and you were probably all as delighted as I was to see Michigan called for Trump fairly early in the evening. So the answer is too big to rig, which is why we want you to get that half-page flyer out. Adam, can you put the thing back up on the screen for people to get this? And also the link, there we go, right there. Yeah, we need to do due diligence. Everybody who's not an election inspector should be an election inspector, or whatever they're called in other states, and so on. You got to have your eyes on the ground. You got to keep your eyes on them, and so on. But the key to this is your offense has to overwhelm their offense while you still have a good defense. And the ammunition for your offense is this. So we need to see more people getting copies of this half-page flyer and organizing with it, and share your organizing stories with us.
Yeah, let me quickly move to the next question, which is kind of related. We need help here in Arizona. How can we get the U.S. Marshals here to help retain the emails, evidence of 2020 and 2022 election fraud? Maricopa County are attempting to delete pertinent records ahead of potential DOJ investigations. Thank you, Lisa, for your concern. We know this is still an ongoing thing in Arizona.
Well, Barbara might want to address the legal aspects of it, but I'm going to address the political aspects. I'm always boasting that we shifted more votes for Trump between 20 and 24 in Wayne County than any other county in the country. Guess what the other county was? Maricopa. So yeah, you've got problems. We need to do, as I say, we need a full election integrity defense. I don't know if we're going to be able to litigate, what happened in 2020. Barbara's probably in a better position than I am to address that. But the one thing I would counsel is never put more emphasis in defense than you are offense.
Thank you, Susan. All right, I'm going to play the next one here. We have less than 10 to go. With the trans shooting becoming ever more popular, why isn't the issue of hormones ever discussed in any way as a potential enabler in altering a person's mental state, which has never been studied in length at all, but given willy-nilly? Thank you, Dave, for your pertinent question.
It's because basically the profession of psychiatry is completely destroyed from the standpoint of having any idea of what goes on in the human mind. Basically, psychiatrists think that we are a biological system, and therefore you can play around with it. You can give it drugs without actually examining the impacts. A lot of people think that SSRIs and other, psychotropic medications are playing more of a role in this violence than has been explored. But the entire hypothesis about SSRIs and everything else being medically necessary is now being shown to be completely false and under attack. What was going on with this kid, in essence, he said what was going on with him. All right. He became trans and he hated it. And he was an adolescent. And he obviously was enamored of, had a fixation around all of the stuff that's circulating on the internet about the validity of killing other human beings. But, the numbing effect of these medications, i.e. they make you mentally numb, which is their purpose. The question has to be asked, do they also make you into a killer? In addition to all of the garbage which is actually sent out to people on social media. So the question about, are the type of drugs which are given to alter hormones also a culprit needs to be investigated. But I think this is a very fertile realm for investigation.
Absolutely. There is a spiritual aspect of humanity that can't be treated with a drug, for certain. Okay, we're really coming down to the final stretch here. Why is Trump sending warships to Venezuela and accusing President Maduro of trafficking narcotics, for which there is no evidence? Thank you, Anna, for your questions, but I think you are very much mistaken on the no evidence.
That particular boat was loaded with drugs. Now, I don't think these guys could say, I didn't know, since.
And this question was sent way before that happened. So I think it's clear there's plenty of evidence to show that Maduro and the state of Venezuela is organizing, at least at the minimum, organizing drug shipments into the United States. Next question. Why can't we identify these crown agents inside our federal government and then lobby to have them removed? Thank you, McRae. I think we have already identified many of them.
Yeah, we identified them, and Tulsi Gabbard is in the process of actually removing most of them.
Thank you. Okay, really just a few left at this point. Again, another quick question. What part does King Charles play in the deep state conspiracy? Thank you, R. Kern.
Well, you've got to actually look at two aspects of this. One is the City of London itself. The other is the monarchy. And Charles has played a critical role in both the environmentalist movement over time, which is really a cover for the, Malthusian movement over time. And Philip was a founder along with the ex-Nazi, maybe not ex, Prince Berhard of the Netherlands, of the World Wildlife Fund, which using a environmentalist cover is actually seized whole tracts of land in Africa for purposes of looting. So there's also an entity called the Club of the Isles, which is basically the way that Charles and his cronies from the city get together and figure out ways to both enrich the monarchy and enrich the city of London. So he's not just a figurehead in the sense that they use him to trot out there and give everybody fantasies about kings and queens and princesses and the other things the royal family is used for in terms of keeping the British people engaged in a fantasy world. You know, he's had a direct role, as did his father before him, in many of the dirtiest operations. And Prince Andrew also has had major roles in British intelligence operations. So they're not just out there for the show. They are involved, but the driver of the thing actually is much deeper and comes from the institutions around the City of London, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the old Round Table movement of imperialists. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Okay, let me do my final recap here. If you're tuning in, you're coming into the very final part of our Thursday live question and answer show with Promethean Action. My name's Adam Sturman. I'm a producer and editor here, and I'm joined by Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. So we do this live show every Thursday morning, but we also do 3 political updates a week, once on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Please like this video if you haven't yet already. It increases our reach. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not yet subscribed. That way, you at least have a chance of getting a YouTube notification. And for those that are already subscribed, been watching for a while, we urge you, subscribe to our free newsletter. I'm going to be telling everyone when my new MAGA 2028 shirt comes out sometime in the next week or two. We'll send you email reminders before we go live, when we do our political briefings. So if you really want to stay in contact with us, please subscribe to our free newsletter below. Okay, so we literally have 5 questions left. Let's see if we can just get through the end of these here. Are we headed to a devastating recession? Much of Europe is already in a recession or the brink of one. Thank you, Margot. I personally don't. I think Trump, maybe if we lose 2026, we'll get into a terrible recession again. But I think what Trump's really trying to do is to prevent us from going the way of Europe.
I think Adam hit the nail on the head. I mean, Europe is under, the direct control of a supranational institution which serves the central bankers. So yeah, it's in a mess. Trump is trying to pivot us back toward an American system economic policy. And as long as he can keep going, I don't think we're going to have one.
Thank you. Okay. Next one here. I recall a few decades ago that the Supreme Court ruled that funding for elections by corporation was equivalent to individuals. This lies at the heart of the problem of the electoral system, with the mega donor funding from corporations, NGOs, and special interest groups having an enormous influence over our elections and removing any real say from ordinary Americans. When is Trump going to address this waste of money and unconstitutional influence? Thank you, Guy.
It's a big problem. I agree, but we haven't come up with a solution yet that's actually consistent with the First Amendment. The presumption is a little bit wrong because it's not corporations who are the problem. It's extraordinarily rich individuals who use corporations, NGOs, and foundations to actually launder their money through to candidates. Zoran Mandami, for example, is a really good example of that in New York City. Trump has instigated by executive order an investigation of all government grants into this system of NGOs and other types of and special interest groups and foundations to ensure that those grants are going for something other than politics. And I think that investigation is something I'm really looking forward to. The larger question of how we actually try and deal with, the contributions to the electoral process itself is one which we haven't really adequately solved. They tried to do it with, McCain-Feingold, and that didn't really work so well. So it has to be looked at again by a Congress, which is actually, concerned about the very same things you are, Guy.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay. Where does Neville Singham and his wife fit into this? Isn't he even worse than George Soros because he has managed to stay out of sight during the riots, etc.? I think in a lot of ways he is the most dangerous player of all. Thank you, Keith.
Well, not more dangerous than George Soros, but of the same type. Yeah, he's a Maoist. He's inherited a lot of money. He works for China in all of his political donations in the United States. He probably could, serve a look for under FAR, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and we'll see what happens to him once you actually do that investigation.
There's one other aspect to him that people tend to miss, which is he basically made his money by selling his, I can't remember, consulting firm or investment firm, whatever it was he built up. He sold it to Apex, which is, I think, the biggest private British hedge fund in the world. So, everyone focuses on his Chinese ties, but as usual, they fail to notice his British ties.
Thank you. Okay. I believe we're coming into the last two questions right now. 46. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon. We live in Sydney, Australia, and follow political developments in the USA with great interest. Me, my wife, Kim, and I don't understand how all these courts around the USA can continue to come up with judgments to stifle or slow down decisions the Trump administration wants to implement. We were under the impression that the Supreme Court had decided that the lower courts cannot make decisions affecting the federal government. However, every day we read of yet another court somewhere in the USA blocking government action, only to be overruled later on by a higher court. How can this happen time and time again? Thank you. And thank you very much, Paul, and your support from Australia. We hear you guys over there.
The first and foremost thing people got to understand is that the entire woke culture, which we've all suffered through in the world, throughout the last period, began in our nation's law schools. Critical race theory came out of the law schools, and that's what you have on the courts. The Supreme Court is going to slowly rein this in, but again, as I indicated before, we need some legislation in the Congress. Again, we need a Congress actually saying that these are the sacrosanct, political powers of the President of the United States under the Constitution, and the courts are not to intrude in it, period. And then it needs to be made plain, and that's how we'll stop this thing.
All right, thank you. And the last one, again, on a topic of legal stuff. If most of the EO Biden signed, the EO's Biden signed is auto pen, wouldn't that make the EO Biden re-signed from Trump's presidency void too? Thank you, Paul. This is a technical question. I don't know.
Well, the auto pen hasn't yet actually been held to be void in an official legal way. You probably got the contradiction there. And Trump, if he decides that it's void, would have to basically reinstitute the EO. So smart perception, but we haven't gotten to the point where that has actually went its way to a final decision as to what's valid and what's not. We're going to go through that as prosecutions against all the people given immunity and given all sorts of things by the auto pen actually, sort of comes home to roost. Most of it automatically, by the way, goes out of existence when the presidency goes out of existence and a new presidency comes in, to the extent that these are executive orders.
Any last words? We're at the end here.
Organize.
Organize.
As we keep coming back to, so much of this will be settled if we get a solid MAGA Congress. That's your job here in the United States.
Yeah, and I just let me repeat one last time. We do this show. We're going to be doing it next Thursday. I see tons of questions coming in on the chat. If you want to get your question into us, please subscribe to our free newsletter. The link's there. The link's posted in the description. You can search for Promethean Action. Get our free newsletter. We'll put the links of where you can submit your tomorrow I'm going to send out an email. The link for today's replay will be in there, and also a link to submit your question for next week's show. So I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to our weekly live question and answer show. And we hope to see you next week. So take it easy.